This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Well, welcome to our Sunday tradition, BARD on Sunday mornings at the altar of BARD, and we have an angel with us today, our special guest. Just like Madonna and Cher, Anahita just goes by the one name. And
thank you. Is that just because you can't pronounce my last name after Mark?
It could be that as well, but I've known Anahita for many years. For those specifically in the LA area, she's a constant fixture as a commentator on the local news stations. And for those who don't know, she's also a very accomplished lawyer and trial lawyer at that. So she knows what she's talking about. I thought today there's a story that kind of piqued our interest, which she's, I think, more in the weeds than I am, because when I mention Tiger Woods, I immediately think of Rachel Yucatel. So that shows you I'm yesterday's news. Anahita, maybe you and Gary, because I think Gary's in the weeds on this also, can bring us up to speed on Tiger's current woes involving his either live-ins or ex-live-ins.
His ex-live-ins, yeah. Mark, it's so good to see you and be on with you. I actually have some very strong feelings about what we are seeing currently take place with Tiger. So we have his 6-year live-in girlfriend that has filed a motion for deck relief seeking to invalidate an NDA that she signed with Tiger. The grounds, and I read the complaint actually.
Okay.
And the grounds that she's seeking to nullify the agreement, she's relying upon the Speak Out Act, which is a new law that just came into effect, which I actually support, which states that you can't enforce NDAs if somebody has evidence of a sexual assault or sexual harassment. In those situations, an NDA is not binding. So she has sort of that action filed in court, which I'm okay with. I mean, she hasn't come out and said he sexually assaulted me. But clearly the implication is, I want to make these allegations, Your Honor, so get me out of this NDA.
So wouldn't that, I know people say, oh, I support it because it's topical and you're supposed to support it, and God forbid if you don't. But could I throw a little counter punch here?
Yes.
Doesn't this just invite more litigation if people want to settle and then sue afterwards? All they've got to do then is allege a sexual harassment or sexual assault, and then you get out of the NDA, which is, by the way, so people understand, generally people pay for an NDA an extra amount of money. I know a lot of clients, I'm sure you've had it. I have clients who say, go public, you shot the hostage, and you're not going to get a nickel.
And I'm sorry to jump in here, but Mark, let me please jump in here. Anahita, you can probably speak to this better than I can, but wasn't there also another complaint where she did not allege any sexual assault, and then this is the subsequent one because she's trying to get the NDA invalidated?
And that's the one I have a problem with. So yes, Mark, I agree with you, what you said about NDAs. There's a public interest in enforcing NDAs, right? Because someone is paying money and they have an expectation that their private information won't be made public. Just in the context of sexual assault and harassment, I agree with the Speak Out Act. I think there should be some evidence before a judge will nullify it. So that's sort of part of that lawsuit. Now, the one I have a problem with, this woman is suing Tiger for $30 million, claiming wrongful eviction. So basically, she's claiming that she had an oral tenancy agreement with Tiger.
She had oral, all right.
For 11 years? Who does that?
Yeah.
What kind of a time period is that?
That's Gary. When I read that lawsuit, I thought, okay, she's not saying 10 years. She's not saying 5, 11.
11?
Okay, cool. By the way, under Florida law, my understanding is that an agreement for tenancy that's over a year has to be in writing. So I don't think
normal in most jurisdictions that you cannot have a tenancy, a month to month, anything of a residential character has to be in writing. I mean, wasn't that didn't they teach us that in law school?
Law school 101. Yeah, so I kind of read that and I'm thinking, okay, she has no cognizable legal claim as far as I understood it. But even assuming, Mark, that there was this oral agreement, how in the world does she arrive at $30 million? Why does she feel she's entitled to that kind of money from Tiger Woods? Simply because he's a celebrity or he's a millionaire? I mean, I see it as a money grab. And I hope, and maybe you can chime in on this because you've represented a lot of these high profile individuals, but I hope he doesn't settle to make that case go.
This is a lesson that I will often counsel clients on. If you settle one, you know, I told this story many years ago. I had a buddy who remember the old Albertsons markets here in Los Angeles? My buddy became the general counsel and many years ago. And he looked at the amount of money they were spending on legal, and it blew his mind. And it turned out they were just paying nuisance slip and fall lawsuits. And they had not only the lawyers' fees, because generally the insurance companies were carving that out and wouldn't renew the premiums, but they were giving, $5, $10, $15,000 to anybody who claimed they slipped an aisle 4. And so he immediately said, I'm just going to try. We're going to try every single one of these. He brought in an in-house team. They tried everyone. Guess what? Within 8 months, they plummeted the number of cases. And I tell clients the same thing. I would guess that Rachel Yucatel, who was the prior accuser, the last wave that Tiger had, for those who don't remember, she came out, she was kind of accuser number one. She's had some recent publicity in regards to that, but then there was a flood of accusers after that. And as I remember, he paid one, and then everybody sniffed that out, and then everybody wanted a payday.
But by the way, what did he technically pay Rachel Yucatel for? What was her cognizable legal claim other than, I was his mistress, I'm going to go public if you don't pay me? I didn't understand how that wasn't sort of borderline extortion. I mean, I didn't really closely follow that case, but as I understood it, he settled that case. She ended up having to pay it back because apparently she breached the NDA by going on some talk show. But I didn't understand that whole concept of paying $10 million for what? So I agree. Maybe that set a precedent. Maybe, I don't know. Am I missing something there?
No, because I think, it would be interesting to have because I speak from having dealt with it, and it'd be interesting to have somebody who is doing these so-called lawsuits, aka shakedowns, talk about what their feeling is, because unfortunately, at least in California, the law has developed, and it's horrible. The law protects basically anybody threatening, I'm going to do this if you don't pay me money. I'm going to do that if you don't pay me money. I just had, and you get slapped, and that can't be the law. I think it's the courts of appeal. I think the Cal Supremes need to step in, because the courts of appeal have really, I think, shirked their duty, because I think you put in a way that I hadn't thought about. What are they paying for? What is the person paying for? Are they paying for the silence so they don't have to deal with it? I mean, I think Tiger, clearly, it was cheaper to pay than it was to go to divorce lawyers, right?
Right. No, I agree. I agree with that. But in this case, I can't imagine that if this goes to a jury, which, as you know, I mean, hardly any cases in civil court make it to trial, that any jury would be sympathetic with somebody believing that she's entitled to $30 million because her boyfriend was a millionaire, or her ex-boyfriend was a millionaire. I find that to be so off-putting that I think it's going to backfire. It's a money grab.
And Anahita, correct me if I'm wrong, but she's getting that number based on her oral agreement that she was allowed to stay in this mansion that Tiger recently purchased. So she's basing that off the rent value of her being able to be in that home for the duration of the 11 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's her argument, but he doesn't want her in the home. Like he broke up with her. He booted her out. He has every right as the owner of that home. And I believe the home is in a trust.
Correct.
And Tiger and his children are the beneficiaries of that trust. So the idea that she believes, or that a court system will hold, that she has some entitlement to live in the home of her ex-boyfriend when he does not want her there. She is not on the title there. It's just, to me, preposterous. I think that she's obviously doing this for leverage. Her attorneys probably think that by filing the motion for debt relief to get the NDA tossed, and then simultaneously filing this $30 million money grab case, that he's going to want to come to the table and settle, because that's usually what happens. So I think it's more leverage than anything else.
And for anyone who's not following this case more closely than we are, there was also a bit of her attorneys, I assume, are the ones who released this salacious story of how she was broken up with, which, you know, I've heard it. It wasn't nice.
I haven't heard, and if it's salacious,
it's good. It's good. She was told, Mark, she was told to pack a bag for a short vacation. She was driven by someone on Tiger's team to an airport, and then she was told, you're no longer allowed to go back to the house. You're kicked out. Like, that was how she was broken up with. Now, is that rude? Probably.
Yeah. I want to hear your opinion on that.
I would have like 30 lawsuits in court right now. I would have $100 million if I sued every guy that treated me like crap. But so what? It's like, you're alleging that for what? He kicked you out. He didn't want you there. It's legally his home. And I think he came out today, and his attorney said, it's not like we just kicked her to the curb. We put her up in a luxury hotel. We gave her some money to get on her feet. She got more than she even was entitled to. He doesn't have a duty to even do that.
If anyone who broke up with me sent me by town car to be broken up with, I would be ahead of the game.
Right. With your Louis Vuitton luggage off to a private flight somewhere. Like,
it'd be the best breakup of my life.
Yeah, like, okay.
So, Anahita, I'm going to switch gears because I'm curious as to what you think. There's been a lot of news, and we did the show on Friday with Karen Agnifilo, who's the ex-chief assistant in Manhattan DA's office. The rumor that Trump has been invited to testify at the grand jury as an omen for, or the kind of the harbinger, if you will, for him being indicted. What do you think about that? What do you think about the underlying case, which is the paying of Stormy Daniels?
Wait, I didn't hear about this. He's being called to testify for what?
Usually, this is what's so strange. In New York, apparently, unlike California, they one of the last stages before they indict you, and they indict more than they go to preliminary hearing, apparently, we're the complete opposite. They invite the target of who they're going to ask the grand jury to indict to come testify. Now, they have to waive immunity, apparently, obviously, because if you were called as a witness by the prosecution, that confers immunity on you, at least to a limited degree. So apparently he's about to be indicted. If you believe, if all of that is what I just stated is true, then that is the last gasp before he gets indicted. Now, the underlying offense, if you will, or the target offense, is that Michael Cohen paid $130,000 off of his HELOC line, his home equity line, which is called a HELOC, and they paid that to Stormy Daniels, then billed that $130,000 to Trump, who, when they paid the $130,000, they deducted it or represented it to be legal fees, when in fact it was, speaking of what we've been talking about, it was money paid for an NDA, so that she wouldn't. And now they're casting that in terms of campaign finance. I think it's interesting, based on the discussion we just had.
Right. I
think that his defense is, are you kidding? I just did it so Melania wouldn't clock me, at the time, right?
Right. That's, again, I didn't see a problem with that type of settlement payment. I'm not an expert on campaign finance law, but we see that every day. We see that frequently. There are sometimes I've had lawsuits where, I represent victims of sexual harassment, and you're suing a company and possibly the CEO of the company who's the perpetrator of the harassment. And oftentimes the payment, if they don't want to submit it to the insurance carrier, they'll find other ways to make that payment. And it might not be directly in the name of the defendant. There's various ways to work around settlement agreements if you want to keep it very confidential and hush hush. Is that a crime? I don't know. I mean, I would suspect he's going to probably try to fight having to be compelled to testify, right? I mean, does he?
He doesn't have to. Apparently what they do there is California, they have a procedure whereby they have a duty under a case called Johnson to present exculpatory evidence to the grand jury. Here, apparently what they do is, as the last step or the penultimate step to asking to indict, they tell the target, you can come in and testify, but he won't.
I see. Okay. So that's almost fair. That's almost something that what a potential defendant would want to do, right?
Right. Because if you think you're going to get indicted, you don't want to get indicted, you want to tell your story and you think that they're off base. Interestingly here, in interest of full disclosure, bank with First Republic, I've always been perplexed by this case, this particular case, because Michael Cohen apparently triggered all of this, including his own prosecution, by pulling the $130,000 off of his HELOC line, the home equity line.
Yeah,
that caused his bank, First Republic, to then file a suspicious activity report, and then the rest is history. And now people may say, well, why are you bringing up First Republic? Well, this weekend, as you know, SVB just got taken over by the California regulators. The rampant rumor this weekend, and I have friends at First Republic, is that First Republic is next. I mean, it's been mind-boggling over the weekend, the number of people that have speculated if they're going down. And I saw somebody yesterday who was tweeting out, I'm going to bet you this guy's got a short position in the stock, because he's saying First Republic is not wiring money on Saturday. They're saying if they're not wiring on Monday. And I'm thinking, okay, dude, have you ever wired money? Because they don't wire money on the weekends. It's only on
like panicking.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm guessing that this particular gentleman who's saying that knows better, but has a short position on this stock. But the theory here, I think, will come down to, or the grounds that they're going to fight are exactly what we're talking about. Did Trump do this so that it wouldn't come out in the campaign, or did he pay this because he didn't want Melania to know?
Yeah.
And by the way, as you and I just talked about with Gary, that is a driving motivation. And be careful what you wish for when you want to say, with the Step Up Act, or whatever they call it, the Speak Out
Act. The Speak Out Act.
Yeah, Step Up and Write a Check Act is what.
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, in civil cases, like they're now, I think in California, trying to pass a law that says you can't compel mandatory arbitration in employment cases, because there is this inherent the idea that you don't want to silence victims and you don't want to sort of protect perpetrators. So I side with that. But again, I think there has to be some sort of standard. I don't think that anyone should be able to willy-nilly come into court and say, well, I have allegations of sexual harassment, nullify the NDA. I think there should be at least some, even if a minimal burden of proof, maybe present some evidence, maybe in camera. I don't know how that particular federal provision works, but I would suspect that there's got to be at least some burden of proof to present to the court before the court will just nullify an NDA based on just mere allegations that there's something there.
Well, I think it's also, people are going to find out fairly quickly that it's going to be the law of unintended consequences, that you're not going to get a quick payout. You're going to have to go to court. And then guess what's going to happen is then your allegations are going to be tested. And I don't want to say that many of these are completely without merit, but I will say many of these are completely without merit. They're basically shakedowns.
Yeah, and so that's why you say be careful what you wish for, because, yeah, you're right. So it could be a double-edged sword. I see it. But again, I just hope that Tiger takes a strong position on this case, because it is so ridiculous. I mean, as an attorney, just reading through the allegations, I can kind of see it's clear as day that she wants to either write a book, she wants to go public, she wants to cash in on her relationship with her ex, simply because he's a celebrity. And that to me is it's not a good look.
And I will say, Anahita, you don't even have to be an attorney to read through it. I've read through it, and it's apparent to me the same things that you've just said, just as a layperson. So for anyone who's interested, I would encourage you to go check it out, because it's a little bonkers.
Yeah, definitely.
Anahita, I know that you and Gary both have told me, although I don't buy it from either one of you, that you've got baby showers today. So
I do, actually. And I didn't realize it was daylight saving.
Sunday morning daylight saving baby showers, right? If you'll believe that, you'll believe that this woman's got an oral tendency for 30 years.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll send you pictures.
Same.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Please come back.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for having me, guys. It was fun.
Our pleasure. Thank you. Let's do it again.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.